Okay, so my name's Kira Dominguez, and I'm the writer of a sweet Regency magical romance. It's coming out February 12th, or it's already out, 2019. And I thought it'd be fun to hop on and kind of take you through my journey from unpublished to traditionally published author. Um, I have been a book blogger for about a decade, and I still do blog over at The Uncrushable Jersey Dress. It's a fan site for Betty Neals. She writes mid-century Harlequin, Mills and Boone, and it's very doctor nurse situation and lots of sweetness, a lot of wonderful things. I have 5 kids, and there wasn't a whole lot of time for me to write, but my fourth one was born, and he was horrible. Like, he is so great now. I really love him, but like he screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. And I think I was really looking to sort of feel like a human being again. So me and my sister got together and we're like, you know what would be really fun if we did this kind of campy book review site. There was 134 books, and we thought, we'll be done with that, and it'll just be a fun kind of sister thing to do together. Nobody will ever read it. It'll be fine. Well, fast forward 10 years, and we have readers all over the globe, and it's amazing. It's a really wonderful and supportive community, and I get to talk to a lot of wonderful women, and a lot of people have been very encouraging of me and my writing, and that could not have been a better foundation from which to begin to think to myself, okay, well, I turn in these very long, complicated book reviews every week. What if I just sustain that? So that started me thinking. It was one summer. It was after my fifth one was born, and she was about 2. So it was 3.5 years ago. I was noodling around on YouTube, and I came across a video about how to figure out a plot. I think it might have been a Brandon Sanderson video. Larry Correia might have been in it. Anyway, and for whatever reason, the methodology for the plotting really made sense to me. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see if I can do this. I'd tried and I'd failed at sort of finishing anything. I did the typical thing. You get 20,000 words into a project and you're like, all the world building's done, now I'm bored. But I didn't ever have a plot or a place to go from there. And so what I was able to do is put on one side of a piece of paper Regency. It's I'd read Jane Austen from the time I was very young, and I knew at least that world could be very firmly built in my head. So I put down a list of sort of things, components of sort of Regency that you think of. And then on the other side, I started to plot some magic. I was very interested in magical systems. I really love reading fantasy and sci-fi, and it really appeals to me and my sense of sort of order and logic and payoffs. So I started sort of doing listing what the consequences or problems or issues would be with a certain kind of magic I ended up sort of having in my book. And then I started cross-referencing from one side of the paper to the other. What would be a problem with this magical system if it ran into this social order? And that was a really sort of dynamic and fun way to start. Well, of course I didn't carefully plot out my book. I was like, I'm off. It was summer. It was like August 1st, and I had all these kids, 5 kids, crawling all over the house, making a mess. I ignored them studiously. That's how I got through it. And I just sort of started writing this very, very bad rough draft. It was really bad. And 6 weeks later, I had 70,000 words. And I had also in that time found Brandon Sanderson's BYU lectures, which if you're interested in writing and you don't know where to start, that's a really wonderful resource. It's enormously rich and it's free. And I thought, okay, well, let's give this a go. And by the end of that 6 weeks, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a book yet. I mean, I'd been sloppily changing names and places, and as you do with a first draft, you shouldn't go back and fix. You should just race through it. And I knew a writer friend, and I was like, you know, what we should do is maybe we could get together once every couple months and talk about where we're at. And she was like, yeah, we should do that. And I knew of another writer friend who had taken a bunch of screenwriter classes, and we all kind of found each other, and we began to start a critique group. And it was difficult, I'll tell you. Me and one of the other ladies had a 2 and 3 year old, and we had to meet at one of our houses, and they would be screaming the whole time. You know, you'd be getting your chapter critiqued and feeling like it was terrible, and this, you know, these minutes, these precious minutes that you managed to sort of like wring from the week were worthless because everything you wrote had to be rewritten, and a child is in your face screaming. And you're just like, oh, are you kidding me? So we did that for a long time. And I remember thinking, you know, if I can just get the pages, this will be a huge accomplishment, even if I'm never published. And that winter, I went to visit my sister, and I went to the Daiso store in Seattle. It's like the Japanese dollar store. And I found these cute little notebooks. I found 2. And I was like, I'm going to buy those. And then when I've got a book, I can print up all the pages and just stick them in there, and like, then I'll, you know, even if I'm never published, this is what'll happen. Well, we continued to meet as a critique group, and I started having to make really hard decisions. I wasn't a writer yet. I was, but I was unstructured and self-indulgent occasionally, all those things that everybody is at first. And I remember getting away one weekend, and I'm having dinner with my critique group on the way back into town. And I got very still, and I said, I think I need to discard 2 point of view characters. Not them, but their points of view. And it was so hard, because they were fun to be inside the head of and to write from, but it was self-indulgent, and it wasn't really like, it was a crutch I was leaning on. And I remember once I did that, it was like this sudden rush of change that was happening with my manuscript. Another critique partner joined us, and she was she's a published author and has published many times over the last decade, and she was amazing. It was like suddenly getting somebody, you know, imagine like living in a small town, and then like the cool kid comes in town, and you're like, I thought we were all kind of cool already, but then no, they're bringing their big city ideas. It was a little bit like that. It was like, oh, we all have to get a little bit better now. And that was scary, and it was hard and great. But critique groups aren't for everybody. I can see how they can be challenging, but I never left one in tears. I never felt unsupported by them. And one of the really great things was, I tell this story a lot. It makes it into my acknowledgments page, of one of my partners banging the table at the beginning, and she's like, it's a romance. Where's the romance? And she was getting really feisty with me. And it was nice because it was just, especially since I am a romance author, at least with this first book, it can be challenging to go and be in a similar critique group with people who are just like middle grade or YA, or, even biographical, historical, as we've had to read as well. It can be challenging to sort of bring the emotional vulnerability of actually being a romance author to it, especially if you've never been one before and don't really know how to navigate that landscape. But they were really supportive, and I can't trade that. What finally led me to start getting my manuscript in final order was a decision to join RWA, that's my trade organization, Romance Writers of America, so that I could submit my chapters to be read for a contest. It's a fairly prestigious contest within the industry. And I was like, well, that's a good deadline. It's a good deadline. And so I did that, and it didn't really go anywhere, but suddenly my manuscript was really taking shape. From there, I had to find beta readers. I was like, okay, well, I think I'm actually getting ready to query, and which was terrifying. I didn't really think I would get published, if I'm honest. So I started talking to friends and just saying, will you read it? And I also was able to draw from the ladies of the Betty Neal site, Uncrushable Jersey Dress, and they were very generous reading my material as well. At that point, I got their feedback, and it was all very good to hear. The hardest thing about beta readers, I find, is convincing them that you really want criticism. Most of them, especially women, I think, really want to be nice. I know I want to be nice, and it's hard to get somebody to say, this thing that you really sweated over for 3 years, you have plot issues, or, but I did have pushback from them, and that was really nice. One other thing that was really wonderful is, again, from this resource that I'd started a decade ago, I was able, the Uncrushable Jersey Dress, I was able to find a couple of fellow authors in there, and one particularly was so generous with her advice. She's self-published, and I didn't ultimately go that route, but she was really generous with sort of the upsides and the downsides, the pros and the cons, and made herself available to talk to. And I thought that was a really wonderful and generous thing to do. I did end up querying. I spent about 3 months querying, and maybe 30 rejections. I thought the rejections would hurt more, to be honest. But everybody who got back to me was very nice. There was some criticism that came back. But B, I think that the critique group had gotten me so used to kind of taking it on the chin that it wasn't personal. It didn't feel very personal when I was getting that. And then finally, I got an offer for publication, not from an agent, but from a publisher. And I was very excited. I was very, very excited. I was in Maui, and there was a tropical storm / hurricane bearing down on the island, and we were having very patchy power outages, and I had to sort of make my decisions there, and I wouldn't really recommend that in retrospect, but one of the things that I was able to do was reach out to some other authors that are published by this same publisher, and one of them, again, was so supportive and full of great advice and really good tips. I've been sort of blown away by how what a spirit of sort of pay it forward everybody has. If you are willing to ask and ask politely, I haven't had anybody say, yeah, I'm too busy, I don't really have time to talk right now. Everybody's been very generous. So then I got my manuscript accepted. I signed the contract. From there, I went into the editing phase, which was really the reason that I chose traditional publishing. I felt that my manuscript was good but not finished, and I didn't trust that I could get it there without some professional feedback. That's really the main reason that I went in that direction. And I'm so happy that I did. I couldn't be more pleased with my cover and title, things that I don't have a lot of control with. But I'd done my diligence and homework as far as the company that I chose to publish through, and I was pleased with that. This is how, this is a little bit of the details of my story of how I went from, again, thinking I was going to see my book in this, which would have been adorable. Don't you all agree? Would have gone really great in this room too. To finally having actually a book that I'm going to be able to distribute, and marketing is another big hurdle in front of me. I'm kind of, I'm more or less terrified of that. It's the opposite. Like, you spend all this time in your little like writerly hobbit hole doing your happy little cozy writing thing, and then it's like you're thrust into the cold cruel world, and you have to figure it out, and have to reach out and be extroverted and talk to people in ways you haven't before. So anyway, that's just a few of the details of my publishing journey. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment and I will get back to you. Thanks.